Can you hear me now? Let's switch up and down with this over here. There you go. I wanted to talk about ambition. This is a topic about which I actually care a great deal. This is a definition from Ambrose Bierce, but philosophers from Aristotle to Ambrose Bierce recognize individual differences in ambition. They can look at, be wary young Cassius, he hath a lean and hungry look. Right? I mean, so real people understand that there's such a thing as ambition, that there are individual differences in ambition, and that they really matter. Some people are just more ambitious than others. My friends in the political science phrased the question, they said, the fundamental question in human affairs is who shall rule? Well, who's going to rule are the ambitious people. That's what that's all about. Psychologists have this fear of power, powerful people, and so forth. So what do the following guys have in common? Darwin, James, McDougall, these were the founders of evolutionary psychology. And what's the alternative to evolutionary psychology? Cognitive theory. So these are the guys who really put psychology, seems to be on a substantive basis at time one. All three of them argued that people are inherently competitive and motivated by rivalrous impulses. And by that they meant competitive, ambitious, upwardly mobile, striving, and trying to get ahead. What happened to that insight? It was derailed or subverted by a group of masterful spinners, starting with Freud. I mean, there's this whole history in psychology of trashing ambition. For Freud, ambitious people are father murderers. There was this famous thing where he's having an argument with Jung, and it was about intuition, and Jung says, I just know things that you don't know, and Freud says, like what? And Jung says, like that was going to happen. He goes like that, and there was this huge explosion inside this wooden box, and Freud passed out, and so Jung picks him up and he's carrying him over to the couch, and Freud looks up at Jung, flutters his eyes open, and he says, father murderer. So, for Freud, ambitious people are father murderers. For Jung, ambition is, he calls it the regressive restoration of the persona. You get involved in your everyday life and you can't then continue with the individuation process. For Adler, ambition is a neurotic defense against feelings of self-esteem, inadequate self-esteem. For Maslow, ambition interferes with the self-actualization process. Type A research says if you're ambitious, you're going to die of a heart attack. And in the five-factor model defines ambition as extroversion and conscientiousness, and it just goes completely away. So this is from the APA dictionary. Extroversion. It's the Jungian definition: an orientation toward the outer world of people rather than the inner world of subjective experience. Extroverts are warm, sociable, and adventurous. Conscientiousness, the tendency to be organized, responsible, and hardworking. Conscientious people are efficient, organized, and boring. And how does the APA dictionary define ambition? There's no entry. Well, think about that. I mean, it's insane. How can there not be a... So anyway. Now, this one, here's where you're going to all get mad at me, but I don't care. Psychological assessment is based on a set of assumptions that are not always explicit. In fact, they are almost never recognized. Many people think assessment is about measuring entities. They're making a claim about ontology. They're making a claim about reality. Measuring entities, measuring traits. That would be Cattell and Ising, most famously here in the land of British psychometrics. I think assessment is about predicting outcomes. That is, peer descriptions, performance, blah, blah, blah. How can you tell if you've measured a trait? How can you ever tell when you're done? You can certainly tell when you predicted an outcome. You just look at the numbers. So I'm agnostic about the existence of entities. So it's measuring entities versus predicting outcomes. Cattell, Ising versus Binet, Strong, Harrison, Goff, and the MMPI guys. That latter group of empiricists they said explicitly, we're not interested in measuring anything, we're just interested in predicting outcomes. And I think that's a very clarifying way. So assessment has a job to do. Assessment is about empiricism, not ontology, making claims about what actually exists beneath the surface. Assessment is about prediction, it's about what predicts, not what exists. So that was my rant about rules of assessment. I mean, it really makes a difference how you think about this. If you think you're measuring entities, you're lost in the world of metaphysics. If you think you're predicting outcomes, you're in a stable world of empiricism. Okay. Extroversion is not ambition. Extroversion concerns content-free interaction. It concerns talking a lot. Extroverts are talkative and impulsive, and measures of extroversion predict talking and being impulsive. Extroversion is useful in cold call sales. It's actually essential in cold call sales. That's where extroverts show up. Conscientiousness is not ambition. Conscientiousness concerns following rules, following external rules, rules out there. That here's the code, follow it. Conscientious people are diligent, dutiful, and conforming. Measures of conscientiousness predict rule-following behavior. Conscientiousness is useful in accounting and psychometrics. So, now here we go with hard work. There are two kinds of people who work hard. Conscientious people work hard because there's a rule that says they're supposed to work hard. They work hard to please authority. They work hard to please their parents, to please teachers. And they do well in school because ambitious people work hard if there's a point to it, if it's going to get them ahead. So how well does ambition predict school performance? It just depends on whether the kid sees the score, the class is relevant to his career. So there are two kinds of people who work hard. One kind of person works hard to please authority and father figures. Second kind of person works hard to get ahead. They want to win. They want to outperform other people. They want to make things happen. So he says, and then from just the interpersonal distinctions, extroverted people, how do they come across? They come across like Adrian Furnham. They come across as sociable, talkative, approachable, and rewarding. They want to get along, which is why they're that way. Achieving students, I should say here, conscientious students. Conscientious students seem diligent, dutiful, respectful, and compliant. They want to get along. It's all about getting along. Ambitious people seem persistent, competitive, driven, and in your face because they want to get ahead. The dynamics are just entirely different, and the external, the social penetrance of the clusters are quite different. Okay, here correlation. This is the HBI, the Hogan Personality Inventory. It was the first measure of 5-factor model designed to predict, developed on working adults and designed to predict performance. Except there's 7 dimensions and not 5, because there are 7 dimensions. And ambition correlates. So ambition is pretty highly correlated with sociability. But it's just kind of a little cluster there of positive affect, really. Okay, so that's how ambition correlates with the other dimensions that you're not. But here, this is important. These are peer descriptions. So people with high scores on ambition are described as not nervous. They're described as not lazy, that is hardworking and after it. Whereas people with high scores on sociability, it's a non-significant correlation with lazy. People are assertive, efficient, planful, not distractible, meaning focused, bold, energetic, and extroverted. The profile for high ambition is very different from the profile for high sociability. They overlap in this energetic, extroverted thing down here, but the rest, it's just a very different syndrome. And then and prudence. Prudence is our term for conscientiousness. It's just a different syndrome. It's a certain amount of focus and a kind of a low profile. They're just not the same. People with high scores and ambition come across differently than people with high scores. You can rate it. If you can rate it, it exists. And what's the goal of assessment? It's to predict outcomes. And in this case, predicting how people are going to be described. This is the best meta-analytic study of personality and job performance yet done. This is done by my wife. It's a paper in Journal of Applied Psychology. The reason it's good is she just uses the HBI. We have literally millions of cases in our archive. She just uses the HBI. So you don't have the problems of trying to put the 16 PF and the CPI and the Myers-Briggs all together and make sense out of that. Just use the HBI, and here's the correlation with overall job performance. And what you always find, which is adjustment predicts the hell out of overall job performance. Ambition is okay. Sociability is uncorrelated with overall job performance. People with high scores on extroversion talk a lot. That's it. They don't do anything. What you say when we're giving people feedback, real job candidates feedback, the guys with high scores on sociability, we say to them, your problem is you're going to confuse activity with productivity. They talk all the time. They don't do anything. They just run around in circles. So there it is. I mean, it's real data, 100,000 cases. What do you want? Different not. Okay. Academics at time back in the 70s refused to acknowledge the validity of personality measurement. They did. It's a tribute to her friend Walter Mischel. And business then adopted the Myers-Briggs because business people knew that there are important individual differences in personality that impact job performance. And if the academics weren't going to help, they're going to go where they could find help, which was the Myers-Briggs. Academics refused to recognize ambition, so here comes proactive personality and grit. The gaps will be filled even though the journal editors don't believe it. HBI ambition concerned the proactive personality as a whole. It's cottage industry research around proactive personality in these organizational behavior journals, and so we've run some analyses with their measure. Proactive personality concerns energy, initiative, entrepreneurism. Both are designed to predict career success, and they do. And our measure of ambition and their measure of proactive personality correlate about 0.4, and neither of them concern extroversion or conscientiousness. I was going to try to have some data together on the grit scale and our ambition scale for this conference, but we didn't quite get the numbers run in time. So, but I'm pretty sure at the item level there'll be significant correlations between grit and ambition, because they're talking about exactly the same phenomena. So what? So finally, what? So what? The 5-factor model is a very useful but utterly arbitrary convention. In fact, there are more than 5 dimensions, and one of those dimensions is ambition. Well, there are more than 5 dimensions of reputation, which is what 5-factor model is about. It's about individuals. It's how people are perceived by other people, and one of those dimensions is ambition. Ambition is not a combination of extroversion and conscientiousness. It's an entirely different phenomenon. Extroversion and conscientiousness concern getting along. Ambition concerns getting ahead. So let's go back to how I started with the political scientist. The fundamental question in human affairs is, who talks a lot? The fundamental question in human affairs is, who respects authority? The fundamental question in human affairs is, who shall rule? And you're going to get that from ambition and not from conscience.